My name is Amelia. I'm 33 years old, and after meticulously saving every single dollar for nearly a decade, I finally purchased my dream home in a quiet Denver neighborhood. My parents always praised my self-reliance, while my younger brother Liam seemed to effortlessly drift through life, buoyed by their unending generosity. Last Sunday, our traditional family dinner veered into uncharted territory when Liam casually announced he was taking up residence in my house. The smile on my face didn't falter for a second as I prepared to drop my own bombshell. Before I get into the details of how I completely upended my entitled brother's plans, take a moment to drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And please give this video a like if you've ever had to draw a firm line with family members who took your kindness for weakness. Growing up in the suburbs of Denver, our middle-class family projected an image of perfect harmony. My parents were diligent providers, ensuring we had a stable and comfortable upbringing. My father was a senior accountant at a downtown firm, and my mother was a beloved third-grade teacher. We never lacked for anything essential, but anything beyond that, the luxuries, had to be earned through hard work, chores, and academic achievement. At least, that was the standard I was held to. Liam, my brother, who is 4 years my junior, seemed to exist under a completely different household charter. As children, I would hoard my allowance for months to afford a coveted new book or a concert ticket, whereas Liam would simply stage a dramatic meltdown in the middle of a department store and emerge victorious with a brand new video game. My parents would rationalize it by saying he was just a sensitive soul who needed a bit of extra coddling. This disparity only widened as we moved into our teenage years and beyond. I can vividly recall the summer before I left for college, juggling 2 jobs, one at a diner and another at a bookstore, just to save enough for my textbooks and supplies. Liam, meanwhile, spent those same months mastering the latest video game releases and lounging with his friends. When it was time for me to move into my dorm, my parents helped, but they were very clear that my university education was fundamentally my own financial undertaking. They contributed what they could, but student loans and a constant part-time job were my companions for all 4 years. Liam, by contrast, was handed a full tuition scholarship from the bank of mom and dad to attend the same university 2 years after me. He spectacularly flunked out after 3 semesters, having dedicated more time to fraternity parties than to his actual studies. Instead of facing any real repercussions, my parents enrolled him in a local community college, which he also abandoned after a single year. This established a persistent cycle of failure and rescue that would define his adult life. After earning my business degree, I dove into the world of real estate. I started at the bottom, an assistant fetching coffee and making copies, but I steadily climbed the ladder until I became a licensed agent. The Denver housing market was ferocious, but I carved out a niche for myself, built on a reputation for unwavering honesty and a relentless work ethic. Every commission check I earned was meticulously divided, with a significant portion funneled directly into a savings account earmarked for a down payment. Liam, on the other hand, treated jobs like fleeting romantic interests. He gave bartending a try but was terminated for generously serving free drinks to his entire social circle. He briefly worked at a mobile phone kiosk until mysterious inventory shortages led to his dismissal. He even made a feeble attempt at selling insurance, but couldn't summon the discipline to study for the licensing exam. Each professional flameout was accompanied by a well-rehearsed excuse: incompetent management, a toxic work environment, or just a string of bad luck. Never once did he consider his own complicity in these repeated failures. Throughout this entire period, my parents continued to be his financial lifeline. They covered his rent whenever he was short, which was almost every month. They purchased a new car for him when his old one gave out, arguing that he needed dependable transportation to secure a real career. They even cleared his credit card debt on 2 separate occasions, delivering lectures on financial responsibility while simultaneously erasing the very consequences of his irresponsibility. When I turned 31, after 9 years of relentless saving and career building, I finally had a substantial down payment. The market was white hot, with desirable properties being sold within hours of listing. My professional background gave me a crucial edge, and when a charming 2-bedroom Victorian bungalow appeared on the market in a sought-after neighborhood, I acted decisively. The asking price was at the absolute peak of my budget, but I was instantly captivated by its original stained glass windows, the wraparound porch, and a cozy reading nook in the living room that was bathed in the perfect morning light. The process of securing the mortgage was an exercise in stress. As a single woman, the bank scrutinized every aspect of my financial history with a fine-toothed comb. It felt as though every dollar I had ever earned was being audited and re-verified. The day I signed the final closing documents and the keys were placed in my hand, I sat in my car and wept for a solid 15 minutes. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was the physical embodiment of every sacrifice I'd made, every extra shift I'd worked, every vacation I'd foregone. It was my validation. My parents came to my housewarming party and seemed genuinely impressed and proud. My dad manned the grill in the backyard, while my mom helped me arrange some of the furniture. Their gift was a generous gift card to a home improvement store. It was a rare moment where I felt my accomplishments were being truly celebrated, rather than just serving as a backdrop to Liam's latest drama. Liam, of course, arrived 2 hours late, giftless, and monopolized the conversation with complaints about his most recent breakup. When he finally did acknowledge my new home, it was to ask if I would let him borrow it for a party since his apartment was too cramped. I politely but firmly declined, which resulted in a week of passive-aggressive text messages about how I'd become stuck up since becoming a homeowner. The following 2 years were a period of domestic bliss. I painted every room, planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, and slowly filled the space with carefully chosen furniture that I adored, replacing the collection of hand-me-downs that had populated my previous apartments. The mortgage payments were a stretch, and the occasional unexpected repair tested my budget, but I always found a way to manage. Having my own sanctuary was worth every single penny. Liam, meanwhile, continued his nomadic existence. He moved in with a girlfriend, only to move back out 3 months later after they broke up. He quit another job because his manager didn't appreciate his creative input on the sales team. He borrowed money from our parents for a car repair and promptly spent it on tickets to a music festival. Every family dinner became a stage for a new Liam-centric crisis, with my parents wringing their hands in dismay, but never demanding any real change from him. Last month, Liam lost his most recent position as an assistant manager at a boutique clothing store. The reason, once again, involved inventory discrepancies, though his telling of the story featured a cabal of jealous co-workers conspiring against him. In the same week, his landlord informed him that his lease would not be renewed, citing numerous noise complaints and consistently late rent payments. At 29 years old, my brother was once again on the verge of unemployment and homelessness. I learned of these events from my mother, who called me to lament how cruelly the world treated her baby boy. The call ended with a peculiar remark about how family needs to rally in times of crisis and how my generation needs to be more supportive of one another. I dismissed it as my mother's usual tendency for platitudes when she was distressed. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have seen the writing on the wall. But I was preoccupied with my own life and its challenges, completely unaware that my family was busy orchestrating plans that would directly involve me without my knowledge, input, or consent. The first clue that something was amiss arrived as a trio of phone calls from my parents within a single week. Normally, my mother or father would call on Sunday afternoon for our weekly catch-up, so this sudden flurry of communication was a small but noticeable deviation. Each call vaguely alluded to family matters that needed to be discussed in person. Whenever I pressed for details, they would deflect, saying things like, "Oh, it's better if we all talk together," or just some ideas we wanted to bounce off of you. Even more unsettling were the out-of-the-blue texts from Liam. After months of near silence, he was suddenly intensely curious about my home's infrastructure. "Just wondering what you pay for internet. Is it fast?" he texted, followed by questions about which bedroom received the most sunlight and whether the neighbors were sensitive to loud music at night. When I questioned his sudden interest, his reply was a breezy, no reason LOL accompanied by a winking emoji. My suspicion intensified when Liam texted me asking for the precise dimensions of my spare bedroom. Just thinking about how big it is, like, could a king-size bed fit in there? This room served as my home office, a space where I spent many evenings and weekends catching up on work. It had never housed a bed, and I had no intention of changing that. Still, buried in a high-stakes work project, I brushed his odd inquiries aside as just another instance of Liam being Liam. That week at work was exceptionally demanding. I was handling a particularly high-maintenance client interested in luxury condos in the Lohi neighborhood. The commission on the sale would be life-changing, but the client seemed to change her mind on a daily basis, sending me on a frantic search for new listings that fit her constantly shifting wish list. My boss had made it clear that keeping this client satisfied was a top priority for the firm, which added another layer of pressure. To make matters worse, my charming Victorian bungalow decided to reveal a costly secret. What began as a minor leak under my bathroom sink rapidly escalated into a major issue with the house's foundation. The contractor delivered the grim news with the kind of sympathetic frown reserved for people who know they're about to ruin your financial year. A significant crack had developed in the foundation, and to repair it properly would cost upwards of $10,000, money that I simply did not have sitting around. This financial haymaker came just 2 months after I had to replace the entire furnace, and a month after dealing with faulty wiring in the kitchen. The house that had stolen my heart was now threatening to become a financial albatross. I had already drained my emergency fund on the previous repairs and was now staring down the barrel of putting a massive expense on a credit card, a move I had sworn I would never make after witnessing Liam's own spirals into debt. In a moment of clear-headed pragmatism, I scheduled a call with my financial advisor. David had helped me budget for the home purchase and had gently cautioned me at the time that I might be overextending myself. Now, as we reviewed my finances, he laid out the stark reality I had been trying to ignore. Between the mortgage, the endless repairs, and my other living expenses, I was slowly but surely sinking. "Have you thought about selling?" David asked gently. "The market in your neighborhood is on fire right now. You bought at a great time, and prices have skyrocketed. You could likely walk away with enough to clear your debts and have a very healthy down payment for something more manageable." The idea of selling my dream home felt like an admission of defeat. This house was a monument to my hard work. But as David crunched the numbers, I knew he was right. Staying on this path was unsustainable, and would eventually lead to financial ruin. Being house poor was casting a shadow over every other part of my life, from my soaring stress levels to my inability to save for retirement. That same evening, I reached out to Melissa, a colleague who specialized in residential sales in my area. She came over the next day and assessed my home with the dispassionate eye of a professional, free from my emotional attachment. She confirmed David's assessment. I could list the house for significantly more than I had paid for it 2 years ago and would almost certainly receive multiple offers. "Would you be open to a quick sale if the perfect offer materialized?" Melissa asked. "I'm working with a couple who just lost a bidding war on a similar home a few blocks over. They're highly motivated and have their financing pre-approved. It felt like the universe was pushing me toward a decision." The very next day, Melissa's clients toured my house while I was at work. By that evening, I had an offer in my inbox, 7% over my asking price, with only one condition: they needed to close within 30 days. To sweeten the deal, they were willing to let me rent the property back for an additional 30 days after closing for a nominal fee while I searched for a new place. The choice was both agonizing and glaringly obvious. I accepted the offer and signed the initial paperwork the following morning. The home inspection was scheduled for the following week, leaving me in a strange emotional state over the weekend. I was about to attend my family's weekly Sunday dinner with this monumental life change in motion, yet I resolved not to say a word about it. The sale could still collapse, and more importantly, I needed to process my own complex feelings before facing my family's inevitable reactions. The inspection went off without a hitch, with only a few minor issues that I agreed to fix before closing. By Wednesday, all contingencies were waived, and the sale was officially moving forward. The closing was scheduled for the following Thursday, just one day before our next family dinner. I would be walking into that meal with the deed officially transferred and a certified check representing my hard-won equity in my possession. As I prepared for the dinner, a whirlwind of emotions churned inside me. There was profound relief that my financial anxieties were being resolved, but it was tangled with a deep sadness over losing the home I had poured my heart into. Pride in making a mature, responsible choice fought with the disappointment that my dream had become unsustainable. And weaving through it all was a growing sense of dread about Liam's peculiar questions and my parents' insistent talk of family matters. I had decided to keep the sale of my house a secret until the ink was dry, partly to avoid jinxing the deal, but mostly because I needed to make this decision for myself, untainted by family drama or unsolicited advice. For once, this was about my needs, not about accommodating everyone else. I had no idea that my secret was on a collision course with my family's own secret plan, or that this Sunday dinner would become the breaking point for all of us. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were a long-standing tradition, a ritual we'd maintained since Liam and I were teenagers. Even after we both moved out, we rarely missed one. My mother would always prepare something elaborate, like a pot roast or a multi-layered lasagna, and my father would ceremoniously open a bottle of wine he'd been saving. These gatherings usually unfolded with a comfortable, predictable rhythm, a cadence built over decades of shared meals. This particular Sunday, I arrived precisely at 5 o'clock, the agreed-upon time. The familiar aroma of roasted beef and garlic mashed potatoes enveloped me as I stepped inside. I immediately noticed that my mother had set the dining room table with the fine china, a step up from our usual casual dinners. A bottle of champagne was chilling in an ice bucket on the sideboard, another deviation from the norm. There she is, My father boomed from his recliner, muting the football pregame show. He rose to give me a hug, patting my back with an unusual level of enthusiasm. Punctual as ever, our reliable Amelia. My mother appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. "Sweetheart, you look exhausted. Work has been keeping you busy, hasn't it?" She gave me a warm embrace, then held me at arm's length, studying my face. "Those circles under your eyes. You're pushing yourself too hard, honey." "Just a challenging client and some house stuff," I replied vaguely. "Something smells incredible, though. Can I help with anything?" No, it's all taken care of. Liam should be here any second." She shot a meaningful look at my father, a glance I chose to ignore. "Why don't you have a seat and relax? Your father already opened a nice Cabernet." I accepted a glass of wine and settled onto the sofa, engaging in forced small talk about the recent cold snap in my mother's herb garden. The conversation felt stilted, punctuated by my parents repeatedly checking the clock and glancing out the front window for any sign of Liam's car. At 5:20, the front door burst open and Liam sauntered in as if his tardiness was an expected part of the evening's entertainment. "Sorry I'm late," he declared, his tone devoid of any actual apology. Traffic was a nightmare, given that he lived only 15 minutes away and rarely apologized for being late. This perfunctory excuse struck me as oddly rehearsed. What truly captured my attention, however, was his attire. Liam had gotten a haircut, trading his usual messy mop for a neat, professional style. He was wearing a crisp, button-down shirt tucked into new-looking khakis, a far cry from his standard uniform of a graphic t-shirt and ripped jeans. Most shockingly, he was carrying a gift bag and what looked like a bottle of wine. "Liam, you look so handsome," my mother exclaimed, accepting his offering. "And you brought wine. How thoughtful." "Just wanted to contribute to the celebration," he replied with a sly wink that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Whatever this was, it was a pre-planned performance, and I was the unsuspecting audience. When we sat down at the dining table, the strange theatricality continued. My mother had set a place for Liam at the head of the table, a seat usually reserved for my father. Dad took the opposite end, leaving my mother and me on either side. As we passed around dishes of pot roast, potatoes, and green beans, the conversation remained stilted and heavy with unspoken intentions. "So, Amelia," my mother began after a few minutes of strained silence, "that big, beautiful house of yours must feel awfully empty with just you rattling around in it. All that extra room." I chewed a piece of potato slowly, buying myself a moment to formulate a neutral response. "It's actually the perfect size for me. I use the spare bedroom as my home office, and the third room is great for storage and the occasional guest." "But surely you get lonely?" she pressed on. "Such a large place for a single person." Before I could reply, my father interjected. "Family needs to stick together in tough times. That's what I've always said. We have to support one another, especially with the economy the way it is." Liam nodded gravely, as if our father had just delivered a piece of profound, original wisdom and not a transparent lead-in to whatever announcement was imminent. "Absolutely. Family first. That's what it's all about." The rest of the meal proceeded along these lines, with pointed remarks about my spacious house, the sanctity of family, and thinly veiled allusions to Liam's recent misfortunes. I saw Liam checking his phone several times as if waiting for a specific cue. My parents continued to exchange glances filled with nervous anticipation. The champagne remained untouched in its ice bucket, clearly reserved for the grand finale. As my mother served slices of her homemade apple pie, Liam cleared his throat, stood up, and reached for the champagne bottle. "I think it's time we let Amelia in on the good news," he announced, starting to peel the foil from the cork. "What good news?" I asked. though a heavy, sinking feeling in my gut told me I already knew the answer. The cork exploded with a festive pop that was jarringly inconsistent with the tension I felt. Liam carefully poured the champagne into 4 flutes that my mother had conveniently placed on the sideboard. "Well, as you all know, I've hit a few bumps in the road recently," Liam began, his tone suggesting he was about to recount a heroic tale of triumph rather than another consequence of his own making. "My landlord is being a total tyrant about the lease, and the job market is just brutal for someone with my skill set." I took a small, deliberate sip of champagne, waiting for the inevitable other shoe to drop. "But every cloud has a silver lining," he continued, raising his glass. "Mom and Dad and I have been talking, and we've devised the perfect solution, a real win-win for everyone." He paused for dramatic effect, clearly relishing the moment. "To new living arrangements," Liam proclaimed, lifting his glass even higher. "Starting next Saturday, I'll be moving into Amelia's house, just until I get back on my feet, of course." The silence that followed his declaration stretched for what felt like an eternity. My parents were beaming, first at Liam, then turning their expectant smiles towards me, clearly waiting for my joyful endorsement of their brilliant scheme. Liam's face was a smug cocktail of entitlement and self-satisfaction. "Mom and Dad said the spare bedroom would be perfect for me," Liam added when I failed to immediately burst into applause. "They figured since you're barely home because of work, you'd hardly even notice I was there. Plus, I can chip in for utilities and maybe even mow the lawn or something." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We just thought it was the ideal solution, honey. Liam needs a stable environment while he job hunts, and you have all that unused space. It's family helping family. And this way, you won't be all by yourself in that big house," my father added. "It's not safe for a young woman to be living alone these days anyway." I slowly looked from face to face around the table. These 3 people had conspired to uproot my life, to install my irresponsible brother into my sanctuary, my home, without a single thought to consulting me. They had discussed my personal space, my finances, and my life, and now they expected me to be grateful. The sheer audacity was staggering. In that instant, a profound sense of calm washed over me. The anxiety I'd felt about revealing the sale of my house vanished, replaced by an unshakable certainty that I had made the absolute right decision for myself. "That's a very interesting plan," I said, my voice remarkably steady, despite the fury simmering just below the surface. "There's just one tiny little problem with it." "What's that, dear?" my mother asked, her smile beginning to waver. I reached for my purse, which was hanging on the back of my chair, and retrieved the thick manila envelope containing the closing documents I had signed just the day before. I placed it on the center of the table. "I sold the house last week. The new owners take possession in 30 days. The silence that fell over the room this time was absolute and profound. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me, cycling through various stages of disbelief. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat in a dramatic gesture I thought only existed in old movies. My father's brow furrowed in deep confusion. Liam's mouth literally fell open, his champagne flute frozen halfway to his lips. "You're kidding, right?" Liam finally managed to say, a nervous, high-pitched laugh escaping him. "This has to be some kind of sick joke, a payback prank or something." I carefully removed the signed deed transfer and the final closing statement from the envelope and laid them flat on the table. The inspection was on Tuesday. All the contingencies were removed on Wednesday, and we closed yesterday afternoon. The new owners are a lovely couple with a 5-year-old daughter who is ecstatic about the backyard swing set I'm leaving for them. My father picked up the documents, adjusting his reading glasses to scrutinize them. His expression turned grim as the reality of the situation sank in. Amelia, why on earth would you do something like this without even talking to us first? This is a major life decision. The irony of his question was so thick, I could have cut it with a knife. You mean the way you all discussed Liam moving into my home before you bothered to inform me? That's completely different, my mother interjected, her voice rising. We were trying to help both of you. By volunteering my home as a crash pad for Liam without my permission? How exactly was that helping me? The calm I had so carefully maintained was beginning to fracture, and years of buried resentment started to seep through the cracks. Liam snatched the papers from my father's hand and scanned them frantically, as if searching for a legal loophole. "You did this on purpose," he accused, slapping the documents back down on the table. "You found out I needed a place to stay, and you sold your house just to spite me." "Not everything revolves around you, Liam," I replied, my voice level only through sheer force of will. "I sold my house because it was becoming a financial black hole. The foundation issue alone was going to cost over $10,000 to repair properly. Money I don't have because, unlike you, I don't have parents who bail me out of every single financial mess I create." "That's unfair, Amelia," my father said sternly. "We have always supported both of our children equally." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Equally? Dad, I worked 2 jobs to pay my way through college while you handed Liam a free ride that he threw away. I saved for 9 years to buy that house while you paid Liam's rent month after month. You bought him a car when his died, but when my car's transmission failed last year, all I got was a suggestion to take the bus until I could afford the repairs myself. Your brother has had a more difficult time finding his path," my mother defended, tears welling in her eyes. "He needs more support." "And whose fault is that?" I challenged. "You've been propping up his bad decisions for so long that he's never been forced to make a good one. He's never had to face a single consequence or actually grow up." Liam shoved his chair back from the table, its legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this sanctimonious garbage. You've always thought you were so much better than me, Amelia. Miss Perfect with her real estate career and her precious little house. I don't think I'm better than you," I said quietly. "I just made different choices. I worked hard for what I have." "Or what I had," I corrected myself, the reality of selling my beloved home striking me with a fresh pang of sadness. "Well, your precious choices have completely screwed me over," Liam spat. "I already gave notice on my apartment. I have to be out by the end of the month, and now I have nowhere to go." My mother gasped. "Liam, you already gave notice. We told you to wait until after we talked to Amelia." For the first time, Liam had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "I was just trying to be proactive, Mom. The landlord was giving me grief about the noise, and I figured, why pay another month's rent when I could just move in with Amy?" "You just assumed I would welcome you with open arms," I said, the full, breathtaking scope of his entitlement finally dawning on me. "You made a major life decision based entirely on access to my property, which you never once bothered to ask me about." "Because you would have said no," Liam yelled. "You've always been selfish. Enough!" My father rarely raised his voice, and his sharp command instantly silenced the room. "This is getting us nowhere. Amelia, is there any possible way you can back out of this sale? If you explain the family situation, surely the buyers would understand." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Are you seriously asking me to breach a legally binding contract, risk getting sued, and forfeit the earnest money, also Liam can have a free place to live? After I just explained that I had to sell for financial reasons? We could help you with the foundation costs," my mother offered quickly, "and maybe chip in for the utilities while Liam stays with you." "The sale is final," I said, my voice firm as steel. "And even if it weren't, I would not cancel it for this reason. Liam is 29 years old. He needs to solve his own housing crisis." Liam pushed his chair back and stood up fully. "Thanks for nothing, sis. Really feeling the family love right now." He stormed toward the front door. "Liam, wait," my mother cried, rising to follow him. "Let him go, Mom," I said wearily. "He needs to cool off." The front door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the glass in the china cabinet. My mother sank back into her chair, tears now streaming freely down her face. "How could you do this to your brother? He's going to be homeless." "He is not going to be homeless," I countered. "He has options. He can find a roommate, he can rent a small studio, or he could even swallow his pride and stay here with you and Dad temporarily while he figures things out." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably at this last suggestion. "Well, we would offer, of course, but your mother just turned Liam's old room into her sewing studio, and all the furniture has been donated. You still have the guest room," I pointed out. "That's really more of a storage space now," my mother said quickly. "Besides, Liam needs his independence. Just not enough independence to secure his own housing, apparently," I observed dryly. My father sighed, a long, heavy sound of defeat. "Amelia, please try to see our side. We're just trying to help Liam get back on his feet. You've always been so capable, so self-sufficient. Liam struggles in ways you can't understand." "Because you never allowed him to struggle," I replied softly. "Every single time he's faced a consequence for his actions, you've swooped in and fixed it. How is he ever supposed to learn to fly if you never let him leave the nest?" "We're his parents," my mother said defensively. "It's our job to protect him." "No, Mom," I said gently but firmly. "That's what enablers do. Real love, real parenting, is about preparing your children for the world, not shielding them from it indefinitely." The conversation went on in exhausting circles, with my parents alternating between guilt trips about family loyalty and bizarre suggestions for how I could still accommodate Liam. Could he stay with me in my new, yet-to-be-found apartment? Could I help pay his rent until he found a job? Would I consider loaning him a portion of the proceeds from my home sale? Each suggestion hammered home the same painful truth. In their eyes, my resources would forever be a communal safety net for Liam. The money from my house sale wasn't my financial security. It was a family slush fund to be deployed for Liam's emergencies. After another hour of this, I gathered my purse and the envelope of documents. "I need to go. I have an early day tomorrow, and I need to continue packing." "Amelia, please," my mother began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I love you both, but I can't have this conversation anymore. Liam is an adult. His housing problem is not my responsibility. I truly hope you help him find a realistic solution, but I have to focus on my own life right now." My father walked me to the door in a heavy silence, his expression a mask of conflict. As I turned to leave, he pulled me into an unexpectedly tight hug. "I am proud of you," he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Even when I don't understand your choices." It was a small concession, but in that moment, it was everything. With tears blurring my vision, I hurried to my car and drove away, the weight of the evening settling heavily on my shoulders as I headed back to my soon-to-be former home. The days following that disastrous dinner were a digital onslaught. My phone became a constant source of stress, buzzing with texts and calls that ran the gamut from manipulative guilt to outright hostility. Liam, predictably, led the offensive with a barrage of angry texts that shifted from "I can't believe you'd betray me like this" to elaborate narratives of how I had single-handedly derailed his entire life. According to him, his entire 5-year plan had been built around the assumption of moving into my house, a plan he'd conveniently failed to share with me. I already told all my friends I was moving to your neighborhood. One particularly galling message read, "Now I look like a total loser because my own sister would rather be homeless than help her family." I fought the powerful urge to reply with biting sarcasm, instead keeping my responses sterile and factual. "I sold my house for financial reasons. Your living situation is a separate issue. My parents adopted a different strategy. Instead of Liam's overt anger, they tried to negotiate, as if we were hammering out a corporate merger rather than dealing with a fundamental breach of trust. Your father and I were thinking," my mother said during one of her daily calls, "what if we helped you with the down payment on your new place? You could get something with an extra bedroom for Liam, just for 6 months, until he's stable." "Mom, that's not a solution," I explained for what felt like the 1,000th time. "I am intentionally downsizing to reduce my financial burden. Adding Liam to any living situation would increase my stress, not alleviate it." Even my extended family got involved. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called to lecture me on my shocking lack of family loyalty. My cousin Mark sent a long, self-righteous email detailing how his own brother had lived with him for a year and how the experience had forged an unbreakable bond between them. Neither of them seemed to grasp the critical difference. Their arrangements had been built on mutual consent, not unilateral demands. Amid this storm of family pressure, I focused on the practicalities of my move. The buyers had generously given me a 30-day rent-back period, giving me a month to secure a new home. The certified check from the sale was safely deposited in a high-yield savings account, a financial cushion that provided a sense of security I'd never known. Working with a different colleague from my firm, I began touring apartments and small condos in more affordable, vibrant neighborhoods. After years of financial strain to maintain the Victorian bungalow, the idea of a simpler, low-maintenance living situation was surprisingly liberating. A modern, stylish condo with no yard to maintain and significantly lower monthly costs began to represent a new kind of freedom. One afternoon, as I was signing the lease on a beautiful one-bedroom loft in a converted warehouse building, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam. "We need to talk. Coming over after work." I briefly considered telling him not to, but I decided a face-to-face confrontation might be more productive than another round of heated texts. When I pulled into my driveway later that day, Liam's car was already there, and he was sitting on my front steps looking defeated. "Nice of you to give me a heads up," I said coolly, unlocking the door and gesturing for him to come inside. The living room was a landscape of cardboard boxes, with labeled stacks lining the walls and ghostly pale rectangles where pictures used to hang. Liam looked around, his brow furrowed, as if the reality of my departure was only just sinking in. "So, you're really doing this," he said. The words an accusation, not a question. "The house is sold, Liam. The new owners take possession in 24 days. I set my purse on the counter and folded my arms. "What did you want to talk about?" Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he'd inherited from our father. "Mom and Dad said I should apologize for how I acted at dinner. So, sorry about that, I guess." The apology hung in the air, thin and insincere. "Is that all?" "No," he admitted, slumping onto the sofa without an invitation. "I came to see if we could work something out. I'm in a really tight spot here, Amy. My landlord is being a complete jerk about the noise complaints, which were totally overblown, by the way. He won't renew my lease, and I have to be out by the end of the month." "That's a tough situation, but it doesn't change mine," I replied, deliberately remaining on my feet. The house is sold. I am moving into a one-bedroom apartment that can barely accommodate my own things, let alone another person. What about a loan then? Liam asked, leaning forward eagerly. Just enough for a security deposit and first and last month's rent. I swear I'll pay you back as soon as I land a new job. The familiar, exhausting pattern was trying to reassert itself. Liam creates a crisis, and the family is expected to provide the rescue. Promises of repayment that would inevitably dissolve into thin air. For a fleeting second, I actually considered it. The money from the sale meant I could help him without causing myself any real hardship. But then I remembered every other loan that had mysteriously transformed into a gift. Every solemn vow to do better that had vanished the moment the immediate crisis was averted. No, Liam, I'm not going to lend you money, I said, my voice unwavering. You've had countless opportunities to build an emergency fund, but you consistently choose to spend every dollar you get. Must be nice to be so perfect, he sneered, the flimsy veneer of his apology disintegrating. Some of us have had bad luck. This isn't about luck, I said, my patience finally wearing out. This is about choices and consequences. You chose to repeatedly violate the terms of your lease. You chose to spend your money on concerts and bar tabs instead of saving for an emergency. Now you are facing the consequences of those choices. So you're just going to let me end up on the street? He demanded, standing up, his voice rising. Your own brother? You have plenty of options that don't involve me, I retorted. You could ask one of your many friends if you can crash on their couch. You could look for a room to rent in a shared house, which is much cheaper than getting your own place. You could even swallow your pride and ask Mom and Dad to stay with them for a bit. None of those are real options, Liam insisted. My friends live in tiny apartments, roommate situations are for college kids, and Mom and Dad's house is in the middle of nowhere with zero social life. I couldn't suppress a short, incredulous laugh. Nowhere was the same suburban neighborhood where we had both grown up, a mere 30-minute drive from downtown Denver. Those all sound like perfectly viable options to me, I said. They just aren't as comfortable or convenient as squatting in my house would have been. That's the real issue here, Liam. You don't want a solution that requires any sacrifice or discomfort on your part. You've changed, he accused, grabbing his jacket. Ever since you bought this stupid house, you've been different, like you think you're above the rest of us. I haven't changed, I said quietly. I've just stopped feeling guilty for having boundaries. Maybe it's time you tried changing, Liam. Maybe this is the wake-up call you desperately need. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he spat, yanking the front door open. Have fun in your tiny little apartment while I figure out how to avoid becoming a statistic. As the door slammed behind him, I sank onto the sofa, the confrontation leaving me shaky but resolute. It had been ugly, but it had been necessary. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused to be pulled into the vortex of drama that constantly swirled around Liam. I had held my ground. It felt both awful and incredibly liberating, like setting a broken bone. The immediate pain was sharp, but I knew that healing would follow. Looking around at the boxes that contained my life, I realized I wasn't just moving out of a house. I was moving on. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my father. Your mother and I have talked. Liam will be staying in the guest room until he finds a new place. We would appreciate it if you could come by and help us clear out some of the storage to make room for him. It was a small victory, but a crucial one. My parents were finally stepping up in a way that didn't involve leveraging my resources or enabling Liam's worst impulses. Perhaps they were finally starting to see the difference between supporting their son and crippling him. As I continued packing, I made another difficult but essential decision. I needed a temporary reprieve from the family drama to focus on my new life. I sent a group text to my parents and Liam, explaining that I would be taking some space for myself over the next few weeks to manage my move and get settled. I would be available for true emergencies, but I needed a break. The replies were telling. My mother expressed hurt feelings. My father sent a simple, "We understand. Take the time you need." Liam didn't reply at all. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it was a start, a chance to hit the reset button on the dysfunctional dynamics that had defined us for too long. As I sealed another box, I felt lighter than I had in years, the bittersweet feeling of leaving my dream house now overshadowed by a sense of profound relief. Moving day arrived, a chaotic symphony of exhaustion and anticipation. The moving company I hired was a model of efficiency, and the systematic deconstruction of my life in the Victorian bungalow began at dawn. Every piece of furniture that crossed the threshold carried a memory. The cozy reading nook where I'd spent countless Sunday mornings with a book and a coffee. The dining room table that had hosted lively dinner parties. The antique desk in my office where I'd closed difficult deals late into the night. All of it was loaded onto a truck, destined for a space less than half the size. As the movers worked, I took a final walk through the echoing empty rooms. In the master bedroom, I touched the wall I'd painted 3 different times to find the perfect shade of serene blue. In the kitchen, I smiled, remembering a disastrous attempt at making homemade pasta that had coated every surface in a fine layer of flour. When the last box was on the truck, I did the final walkthrough with the new owners. The young couple was buzzing with excitement, their joy palpable as they planned where their daughter's toys would go. Their happiness was contagious, and as I handed over the keys, I felt a sense of peace. My house would become their home, and there was a certain beauty in that continuity. The first few weeks in my new loft were an adjustment. The space was modern and sleek, with polished concrete floors, exposed brick, and enormous industrial windows that flooded the open-plan living area with light. It was a different kind of beautiful, but adapting to the smaller footprint and the ambient sounds of city life took time. The most significant change, however, was the overwhelming sense of financial relief. After paying off the old mortgage and setting aside money for taxes, I had enough to clear all my outstanding debt and establish a robust emergency fund. My monthly expenses plummeted. For the first time in my adult life, I could look at my bank balance without a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Across town, my family was navigating its own adjustment period. My parents had made good on their word and moved Liam into their guest room. According to my mother's occasional updates, the arrangement was far from seamless. "He stays out all night," she complained during one call, "and he leaves his dirty dishes in the sink, no matter how many times I ask him to rinse them." I listened with sympathy but refrained from saying, "I told you so." This was a lesson they had to learn on their own. The real breakthrough came about a month after my move. My father called with astonishing news. "Your brother has a job interview tomorrow," he said, his voice a mix of pride and disbelief. "A real professional job at a marketing firm downtown. He actually asked me to help him practice his answers." "That's fantastic, Dad," I replied, genuinely happy. "What prompted the change?" "Well," my father said with a dry chuckle, "your mother laid down some house rules. Rent due on the 1st of the month, a list of weekly chores, and a curfew on weeknights. Liam threw a fit, of course, but when she held her ground and I backed her up, he realized we were serious." "You're charging him rent?" I couldn't hide my shock. "Not much," my father admitted. "Just enough to teach him some responsibility." We're putting it all in a separate account to help him with a security deposit when he's ready to move out. He doesn't know that part, though. It was a small step, but a monumental one. My parents were finally treating Liam like an adult. 2 weeks later, we all gathered for the first Sunday dinner since the fateful confrontation. I arrived feeling apprehensive, but to my surprise, the atmosphere was relaxed. Liam, dressed in the kind of business casual clothes I'd never seen him wear, announced that he had gotten the marketing job. "It's an entry-level position," he explained with uncharacteristic humility. "But they said there's a lot of room to grow if I apply myself." "That's wonderful, Liam," I said, and I meant it. "Those marketing courses you took in community college will finally come in handy." He nodded, meeting my gaze for a brief moment. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. Later, while helping my mother with the dishes, she pulled me into an unexpected hug. "I owe you an apology, Amelia," she said quietly. "Your father and I realize now that we haven't been fair to either of you. We expected far too little from Liam and far too much from you." The simple admission brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Mom. That means more than you know." Over the following months, a new, healthier family dynamic began to take shape. Liam found a small apartment he could afford near his new job. When he hosted a small housewarming party, I brought him a potted plant and a gift card to the local grocery store. "Thanks for coming," he said awkwardly as I was leaving. "I know things have been weird. Family is always complicated," I replied with a small smile, "but we're figuring it out." "For what it's worth," he added, stuffing his hands in his pockets. "I get it now. Why you were so protective of your house, of your independence. I had no right to expect you to sacrifice what you worked for just because I messed up." It wasn't a grand, tearful apology, but coming from Liam, it was seismic. "I appreciate that," I said, "and for what it's worth, I'm really proud of the life you're building for yourself now." As summer bled into autumn, I settled into my new life. The loft felt like home. My financial stability allowed me to excel at work, and I even started investing, building a future on a foundation of smart decisions rather than stressful debt. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker to life, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Got my first performance bonus today. Taking myself out for a steak to celebrate. Never thought I'd say this, but thanks for not letting me move in." I needed the kick in the pants. I smiled at the message. The journey to this point had been painful, but necessary. Sometimes losing what you think you want is the only way to find what you truly need. 6 months after selling my dream house, I stood in the living room of a modest 2-bedroom townhouse in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. Sunlight streamed through the windows, overlooking a small private patio. The space was smaller than my former house, but infinitely more practical. "What do you think?" my realtor asked. "I think this is the one," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. This time, my home purchase was guided by logic, not just emotion. My down payment was substantial, my mortgage was manageable, and my future was secure. The journey had taught me so much. I learned that true family support isn't about shielding loved ones from consequences, but about encouraging their independence. I learned that financial security and peace of mind are far more valuable than the status that comes with material possessions. And I learned that setting firm, healthy boundaries, while difficult, is the foundation of any authentic relationship. Selling my dream house had felt like a failure, but it had opened the door to a more balanced, joyful, and fulfilling life. After the closing, I sent a group text to my family. "Just signed the papers on my new place. Smaller, smarter, and something I can actually afford. Housewarming party next month. Liam, you're in charge of bringing that amazing spinach dip you made for Thanksgiving. His reply came back almost instantly. Only if you promise not to sell this house the next time I need a favor. The joke, which would have been laced with bitterness 6 months ago, made me laugh out loud. That evening, sitting in my new empty townhouse, I felt a sense of contentment that had eluded me even in my supposed dream home. True security, I had finally learned, doesn't come from a beautiful facade. It comes from wise choices, healthy boundaries, and the courage to build a life based on reality, not just appearances. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that others didn't understand, but that you knew was right for you? Share your own experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about setting boundaries and forging your own path. And please share this video with anyone who might be struggling with family pressure or financial stress. Remember, sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most profound growth. Thank you for listening. End of story.